Hey guys, welcome back. This is the story about what if Naruto was a hollow. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and like the video as well, it really means a lot. So let's start the what if. The solid metal doors shut completely, and the villagers of Konoha, as well as the girl Kanahaji, had disappeared underneath the ground, never to be seen again as far as Naruto was concerned. His dream and his plan had been fulfilled, and he was totally satisfied. There was no reason to have their ugly mugs sticking around his business anymore, and from now on he could focus on bigger, better things. The soldiers in the stadium were waiting for his orders, but he didn't really care right now. They could excuse themselves if they felt like it, and didn't need his permission for every single damn thing. There was one more thing he needed to do before getting on with his life. He leisurely walked up the staircase to the control box, as the soldier who operated it exited the room. After casually obliterating the errand car, Naruto walked inside. Along the walls were several mechanisms that were used to operate the traps, and a large level near the left side which controlled the door that opened to the underground. He smirked lightly, before he charged up a zero in the palm of his hand. He released the beam of energy, which collided with the lever. A small explosion of light and metal, and now all that was left was a charred and broken lever, which completely cut off all the access the Konohan villagers had to the outside world. They were trapped, with no way for anyone on the outside to release the lever. Of course, now Naruto had bigger fish to fry. While he had gotten his symbolic revenge against the village that he so loathed, there was still a much bigger target than he needed to take down. The Soul Society. That was where all the original villagers and his original friends were now. He would have to destroy them. And, as much as hated to admit it, he wasn't prepared to fight them yet. He lacked the resources, the manpower, and the information to successfully wage a full-scale assault on Soul Society. The majority of the power lay within the hands of the 13 captains, and he knew nothing about their abilities other than that they were absurdly skilled in battle. He needed information on them, but there was no way to get any. The thought was frustrating, to say the least. If only there were some kind of archive about Soul Society within Huecomundo, but Naruto had never heard anything about that. He would have to get his hooks into the place first, and he also needed to consult the Libro de Ciclos again. Emergency! Emergency! A lone Shinigami shoved a 4th Division member out of the way as he rushed down the hallway. The symbol of Urahara Kasuke's 12th Division was underneath his robes, displayed proudly for the world to behold. There was a stack of papers nestled underneath his arms, and he stopped to panic as a few of them wormed their way out from underneath him. Taicho! He gathered them up hurriedly, before he hustled up to the sliding door that led to his captain's quarters. Knowing the captain, he was probably busy at work on some crazy little invention that would work surprisingly well in the end. The Shinigami thought back to what he saw over the monitors. That massive wave of hollows descending on that one village that got special treatment. Obviously, the Shinigami stationed there were annihilated in an instant by the wave of red. And, before anyone could react, the humans had disappeared. But, it wasn't like the normal hollow attack where they simply got eaten. No, this time the humans disappeared off the face of the earth, and their village was left in shambles. This was an anomaly, it had never happened before, and hollows weren't known to do anything besides eat humans. This time there was intelligent planning behind it, considering that the Shinigami were taken out first. A dirty blonde-haired man dressed in the captain's Haori of the 12th Division yawned as the door was open, before clumsily rising to his feet. He stretched his arms above his head, and the Shinigami noticed the unpleasant smell of noxious fumes wafted out of the room. What? He said simply, his lax demeanor at odds with the reputation of a captain, as well as at odds with the subordinate directly in front of him. When you've seen as much as him, you learn not to care about so-called emergencies. The unseated Shinigami held the stack of papers up in front of his captain, which would give him the full report on what had happened. Urahara stared at it while looking unimpressed. He was hoping for some sort of breakthrough on the latest invention. We need to give these to the 9th Division right away, Urahara Taishu. This is unheard of, he clamored. Urahara took the stack of papers from the Shinigami, leafing through what appeared to be the data on the destruction of Konoha. His eyes widened. Over 100,000 hollows congregated on a spot less than a spirit mile. I'm surprised the place didn't implode on itself due to their presence alone. Then again, the village of Konoha has always attracted this kind of trouble from hollows. It's been that way ever since the elemental countries were discovered. He commented. But that's not the most surprising part of this data. According to the report, readings indicate the entire village was destroyed in no time at all, and the citizens weren't subjected to the regular hollow treatment. They weren't added to the hollow's power, they just disappeared off of our radar, he said. Yes, sir, that is the most perplexing part of it. Hollows can't possibly be this coordinated, nor intelligent enough to carry out anything other than eating, the other Shinigami said. Urahara looked at him blankly. I think you're underestimating the potential of hollows. They can be crafty, and it's not unheard of for them to band together to form entire governments. But that's not the issue here. What I'm really concerned about is the way Namikaze Fukutechu and those that come from Konoha will react to this. Urahara sighed, before looking at a few photos of the ruined village. The results were devastating, even if there were no corpses to be found. This entire thing would definitely cause an outcry around Siriidii. The hollows were getting more organized, and more bold. The former Shinobi of Konoha made up a good chunk of the Shinigami force, and those who were a part of it still had tremendous pride in the village that they once called home. Particularly, those who made it to the higher seats had the most pride in it. The latest development would no doubt crush them. This could be a problem. The security we had over in Kanehagakure no Sato clearly wasn't enough to protect the village. Over 5% of all Shinigami come from that village. They have a natural tendency to have more Ryatsu and be all around better fighters. With the destruction of the village, the rate is going to go down, and we're still undermanned regardless. Urahara gave the report back after he had studied it. You can forget the report to the 9th Division, this goes far beyond a profiling of a hollow. I'll have to request a captain's meeting and discuss things there. We'll have to decide what we're going to do. If organized hollows can wipe out an entire village with maximum security and a warrior populace, there's no telling what they could attack next. Yes, sir, saluted the unseated Shinigami. Urahara sighed, as he reseated back into his quarters. They would definitely have to step up their game some more if they wanted to compete with the hollows. Just going out there and slashing with a Zanpakuto wouldn't cut it anymore. They needed better tracking systems, they needed to be able to see this type of thing in action and nip it in the bud. A small explosion took place as Urahara tinkered with his latest invention again, and the captain was covered in soot. Although he had been a captain for merely 3 years, he had the respect of almost everyone in Seoul society as a genius inventor. But some of his inventions were harder to create than others. Urahara looked over to his main desk, at the top of the shelf. On the top, within a glass case, was a black orb of sorts. It was opaque, and didn't shine with any kind of ethereal energy, signifying that it was nowhere near completion. Absolutely no one knew about this yet, not even his most trusted followers, and if push came to shove he just may have to get rid of the damn thing. It could easily become too powerful to use for any kind of good. What? Shinji winced as he relayed the information he had heard to his vice-captain, Namikaze Minato. It was times like this where Shinji could just quit and leave the 5th Division to his vice-captain, Minato Namikaze, or his third seat, Aizen Susuke. Honestly, Minato already knew Bankai, so he was a prime contender for the spot. Susuke had a lot of potential, and was probably Minato's equal if he didn't know Bankai. However, Shinji thought the third seat was going to learn it any day now. That partially worried him. Honestly, he would have reacted the same way if he were told that his hometown had been destroyed. Hell, Konoha wasn't even his hometown, and even he reacted in disbelief over it. Though, that was more due to the circumstances at play than any sort of attachment to the village that his vice-captain once called home. Hirako Taishu, please. Say that again. I want to make sure I heard you correctly, Minato said, his voice eerily calm. Anyone could tell the tension that was behind it, though. The 5th Division captain sighed, denial. "I'm sorry, Minato, but that's the way the captain's meeting went." According to the 12th Division, there is no doubt that the village of Konohagakure no Sato has been destroyed by an unknown hollow attack force. Even with the personal guard at that location, there was no way that they could have survived against a wave of over 100,000 hollow. "It's better that you don't see the report." Shinji added that last part as a mere whisper. Minato stared, his mouth opening and closing like some kind of fish. He tried to talk to his captain, but there was no sound coming out, and his mind was in complete shock. He was too dazed to do anything but stare. The Rekage was devastating, but Kasuke said that this wasn't a normal hollow attack. Rather than eating them, they simply disappeared from the face of the earth. "I'll tell you my theory on it, they were swept up into Hueco-mundo." After Minato heard that, he found his voice. "So they're still alive. That means that we could, Shinji, cut him off on the spot." "Hold your horses there, Minato. Yes, they might be still alive, but we have no idea how to get to Hueco-mundo, and we don't know whether they're there in the first place. It's worrisome if that were the case, because that means that the Hollows figured out some way to get humans to Hueco-mundo." Minato stared at his captain, his frown deepening. "Look, I hate to tell you this, Minato, but you've got to let it go. Go tell your comrades from the village about this, and mourn together with them. That's all you can do at this point in time." "I'm sorry." Minato nodded stoutly, he couldn't stop a few tears from flowing down his face. Without even bothering to address his captain, the vice-captain of the 5th Division walked out of Shinji's quarters. A few Shinigami stopped to greet him, but they were met with a cold stare. Shinji sighed again. "Minato better get over this quickly. I don't want him becoming obsessed over this." Shinji looked down, there was a copy of the report sitting on his desk. He leafed through it, coming to a halt on one of the pictures. It was a semi-close-up of a humanoid figure of about 5.5 feet tall, grinning madly as it was about to decapitate the poor soul that was taking the picture. The figure was wearing a hooded brown robe, so most of its face was obscured, save for the lunatic grin it was wearing. The only other striking feature about the figure were 2 hollow mask-like protrusions sticking out of holes in the top of its hood. Shinji had heard of beings like this before, he believed they were called Arankar, though he had never seen one in person. They didn't really take action in the human world. Supposedly, Arankar were hollows that had removed their masks and gained the power of a Shinigami. If that were the case, and an Arankar was leading this crusade, then no wonder the hollows were able to become so organized. He studied the picture again, noting the clearer features from the last time he saw a picture from Konoha. "The last time I was in Konoha. That was back when I was a vice-captain. I was called to defend the borders of Konoha against an attacking Ajuchas. A fox, if I remember. The damn thing was obsessed with destroying that village. I remember that now, that grinning fox Ajuchas was the only hollow I ever lost to in my entire Shinigami car. Wait, grinning, fox hollow?" He turned back to the picture at hand, studying it closely, his heart beating in anticipation. He knew that grin from anywhere, it was burned into his brain after he had been defeated. Those 2 protrusions on the top of the figure's head, they looked familiar. Shinji stood up from his desk chair, calling 2 of his newer recruits into his quarters. "Yes, Hirako Taishu," they questioned. Shinji pointed to the one on the left. "Go to the 12th Division right away. Tell them Hirako Taishu sent you and request the residual Ryatsu samples from the recent attack on Konohagakure no Sato, and the ones from the attack 160 years ago. It should still be in the archives of things from before its founding. Tell them to run a few tests on them, and see if we can find some kind of match," he ordered. The Shinigami on the left saluted and ran out of the building. The Shinigami on the right waited for his orders. "You have a much simpler duty. Go to the 9th Division and tell them that we may need to update one of the hollows in Siriidi's Most Wanted," he ordered. The other Shinigami mimicked his comrade, and then took off. Shinji sat back down and calmed his breathing, they might need to hold another captain's meeting. Siriidii was beginning to change for the worse. They wouldn't be able to keep up with the hollows at this rate. And they had been doing so well before. Minato was glad that he had left Taiki and Akane at home today. The young, impressionable Shinigami wouldn't like to hear this. Physically, they were now 14 years old, and seemed to be in that teenage phase. Still, they were getting along in life well. Maybe they would surpass him and Kushina soon. He had invited everyone else that he knew to the conference, though. Even Kushina didn't know what was going on yet, and it would break his heart to tell her. Other than that, some of Naruto's friends had joined the Shinigami forces, and they were eager to learn whether or not their friend was safe. All in all, the meeting consisted of many people, including himself, Kushina, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Kakashi, Aosuma, Rin, Shikamaru, Niji, Hinata, Kiba, and Ino. Minato was glad that he scooped up some of Naruto's friends after they died in the war, because they were getting quite proficient in their own right. Those 5 had become seated officers in their division. Kushina and himself were both vice-captains. There were a few others within the association that he didn't know personally, but they weren't seated officers. Their character is lacking, so there's no way they would ever be important. Minato thought, but he would never say it out loud. Anyway, their eyes were all on him, staring at the vice-captain blankly. He was the one who had called this meeting to order, so it made sense that he would be the one talking. And boy, did he have news. He might as well not sugarcoat it. Everyone. He began, as the listeners tuned in. Konoha has been destroyed. He said simply. Silence. Dead fucking silence. Not a single voice was heard from that room as Minato delivered the words to them that would be most devastating to all of them. Their beloved village, the place where the will of fire burned strong, was now gone. Some people had their mouths opened, while others still simply stared wide-eyed. Whatever the case, there wasn't a single emotion that was calm in that room. Even Hyuga Niji was visibly stunned. After nearly a minute of stunned silence, someone finally gathered their wits enough to speak. How? Asked Hyuga Hinata, of all people. Minato had always had a soft spot for the girl, ever since she had arrived at the Shinigami Academy. Especially after he learned that this was the girl who was after his first son's heart. She was almost as torn up at his absence as Minato was. Minato's eyes were downcast, and the former Hokage refused to meet glances with anyone, afraid to see depressed and stunned glances. Hollows, but that isn't the most surprising facet of the whole ordeal. It was a wave of over 100,000 hollows. They didn't stand a chance. But it was coordinated with the kind of coordination a group of hollows can't hope to have. So, you're saying this was someone's plan, shouted Inuzuka Kiba. Minato stared at him, there were tears in his eyes, and he was reacting in the best way he possibly could, with anger. Most likely, yes. And that's not where the report ends. I don't know much about the details of what happened, but it seems that there were no traits of a normal hollow attack. Instead, it was like the villagers of Konoha just disappeared, never to be seen again. So, that means they could still be alive out there, right? Shikamaru added his 2 cents into the conversation. Usually, he only attended these meetings out of obligation, but now he was paying rapt attention to the proceedings on display. I wouldn't get your hopes up on that, Shikamaru. From all accounts, this was a hollow attack, and hollows have never known to be merciful. Even if they're still alive, they're probably suffering some horrible fate, wherever they are. Jiraiya said stoutly. That seemed to be his way of dealing with it. He was purposely trying to keep any emotion out of his voice. Needless to say, it wasn't working, and he still sounded visibly upset. No one seemed to blame him about it. Well, are we just gonna sit back and let this happen? We need to bring whatever sick fuck did this to justice. Kiba shouted passionately. He sounded unrefined, but his sentiments were shared by most of the group. Trust me, Kiba. That is exactly what we plan on doing. We can't let whoever was behind this to get away with it, and we certainly can't let it do this to another village. We will find whoever did this," Minato said, determination flowing through his voice. The others rose from their seats as well. They glared determinedly at Minato. "If I know my captain, he's already begun work on who the mastermind behind this, if there is one at all. It shouldn't be long before we figure the true circumstances behind the attack," Minato explained. "I would like you all to wait patiently until that time comes. Don't try anything reckless, and don't show any emotional turmoil while you're on the job. I know this is a hard time, but we must mourn in silence," Minato said, his voice tinged with more sadness. These words seemed to drain the fire from everyone's spirit, and they slumped back in their seats, the realization that their village was gone coming back. "But, when we get our evidence, we will show the hollows that did this our will of fire. We will bring them to justice for what they did to our beloved village. Even if Konoha is now in shambles, we will show them our spirit, the love that comes for everyone in the village," he shouted, the charisma of a former Hokage being embedded in his words. He turned away from them, and his voice became much quieter as the more depressing aspect of this sank in. "At this point, we can only pray that our villagers are safe," he paused, before turning back to them. "Wherever they are, I just hope that they aren't dead. I really appreciate you helping me get to the bottom of this, Kasuke," Shinji commented as he and Urahara walked through the halls of the 1st Division barracks. They were both on their way to another captain's meeting regarding the fate of Konoha. Urahara was carrying 2 glass containers of what appeared to be concentrated Ryatsu. Shinji looked like Hiyori had gotten to him again. "No problem. This mystery over what happened to Konoha is something that will affect the input of new Shinigami, and we need to be prepared for this Arrancar, should he ever come onto the scene again. Have you sent word to the 9th Division?" Urahara asked. "Yeah, they're waiting for some solid evidence before they update their archive. We found the hollow we were looking for, though. A small-sized fox Ajuchas going by the codename Vulpes C. Urahara nodded. "Yeah, and according to the Ryatsu samples we got from the archive and the ones from the Seriidi's Most Wanted, he was there during both invasions. Except, he seems to be much more powerful this time. The first sample indicates he was a simple high-level fox Ajuchas 160 years ago, something any captain here could take out. But, now he seems to be a Vasto Lorde-class Arrancar hollow. But, this doesn't prove anything. It just means that Vulpes C is a very strong suspect in being the mastermind behind the destruction of Konoha. According to the archives, he's been inactive in the human world since the attack on Konoha 160 years ago. The only reason his record hasn't been scrapped is because he was the main reason that hollows now go to the elemental countries. I don't understand why he would become active again now," Shinji replied. "Maybe he was just biding his time. But, it doesn't matter. If we get the proof on this hollow, we should be able to follow his Ryatsu signature after we've familiarized ourselves with these." Urahara motioned to the glass containers, containing the concentrated essence of a hollow's Ryatsu. "I'll say. It's a very pungent Ryatsu, and one I don't think I'll be able to forget. But, on to another concern. Come out, Susuke." Shinji called backwards down the hall, where it angled directly to the right. Anyone hiding there would be out of view. Neither Urahara nor Shinji looked surprised as a bespectacled Shinigami rounded the corner from behind them. A soft smile played on his lips as he observed the 2 captains discuss. "Hirako Taishu," he said distantly. "You shouldn't eavesdrop on folks so much, Susuke. How much of our conversion did you hear?" Hirako asked. Urahara panned his head between the captain and the 3rd seat. Aizen's expression didn't change. "Forgive me, Hirako Taishu. I was curious about the state affairs in Konoha, considering Minato Fukatechu has been so distant lately. I couldn't help but overhear everything that you said. I apologize," Aizen remarked. Shinji ran a hand through his hair, and sighed exasperatedly. "Whatever. Just don't let it happen again. I'm already in enough heat for blabbing what could be top secret information, but this news is gonna come out sooner or later, so I'll let it slide." Aizen smiled and bowed at his captain, before he dismissed himself down the hallway. Once he was out of sight, he clutched the hilt of his zanpakuto, which was hanging at his side. This would be too easy. The captain's meeting was set up like a standard one, 6 captains on each side, with the So Taishu in the center in his chair. The far wall had space reserved for a projector image. Yamamoto looked up expectantly as the 2 captains entered the room, their supplies hindering their weight slightly. This was their meeting, after all. The other 11 captains were already there. They looked at the other 2 blankly, as if they didn't care what Urahara and Shinji had to say. Shinji took his place in the line of captains, while Urahara began to set up the projector. After 5 minutes of tinkering with it, a light shone out of the narrow end of the camera, projecting the picture of the figure seen in the report. A few captains stared at the picture, while a few more glared at it. Either way, no one knew what to make about the figure. It clearly wasn't your standard hollow by any stretch, given the humanoid figure. Regarding the incident in Konoha 2 weeks ago to this day, we believe that we have found a prime suspect in who was leading all those hollows, as well as who orchestrated the attack, Urahara began. Yamamoto stared at him intently, but didn't stop his speech. Furthermore, I have analyzed the Ryatsu at this attack, as compared to the attack on Konoha 160 years ago by the hollow known as Vulpes C. On both incidents, the Ryatsu of Vulpes C has been noted to have existed in some way or form. In addition to that, he is now classified as a Vasto Lorde class Arankar, rather than the Ajich's hollow from the first attack, making him a prime leader of hollows. We believe that the picture taken here is of Vulpes C, if not another Arankar directly under his control. The captains remained silent. We lack definitive proof at this point in time, but if we can browse through the archives on this particular hollow, we may be able to crack this case and strike the source of the invasion before another one can occur. Would that be acceptable, Muguruma Taishu? He turned to address the 9th Division captain. Kensei looked thoughtful for a moment. He turned to Yamamoto, who nodded at him. I guess that would be alright, if we can get one step closer to solving this. Just don't make any modifications to his profile without any definitive proof, he said apathetically. Of course not, as a scientist I know better than to do that. Yamamoto banged his staff against the hardwood of the floor, bringing the group's attention back onto him. Very well. I will leave the investigation to the 12th Division Captain Urahara Kasuke. The wanton destruction of Konohagakure no Sato is trampling all over the world's justice, and is an S-class security threat to the human world. The hypothetical mastermind behind this needs to be classified as a top-secret threat. Even if this is just a random attack of hollows, this is a precarious situation. Without the input of future Shinigami from that village, I hereby order all divisions to increase the intensity of their training. The Gotei 13 must not fall behind with the advancements of the hollow race. He paused a little while to let the information sink in, before he banged his staff again. You are all dismissed. 2 nights later, an unidentified figure snuck into the research facility, where the Ryatsu samples of Vulpes C were being held. He was admittedly a little excited about the entire thing. That little bit of information he had heard would provide him with a perfect weapon for his army. If it was a Vasto Lorde class Arankar, and led a massive army of hollows, then this hollow was powerful, and likely had more powerful hollow and Arankar within his ranks. The weak ones would be perfect for his experiments. With his shurikai, sneaking into the 12th Division's research facility was as simple as could be. Even with all the traps and security measures the place had, it would be so easy to conjure up some hypnosis so no one ever expected anything. He had already gotten through about half of the hindrances. A brown-haired man in the Shinigami uniform of the 5th Division adjusted his glasses, before he walked into the main lab where the samples were on display. The 12th Division really was quite useful to him. He got all his other equipment from them, and they never even realized that it went missing. Honestly, he almost hoped he had gotten drafted into the 12th Division, rather than the 5th. Ah, there was the display case now. There were 2 of them, but he would only need the one on the right. It would give him the means to track the Arankar down, and since he was making a breakthrough on the Garganta, it would be soon that he would be able to set off. Shatter, Kyuka Suijetsu, he whispered, setting an illusion over the glass so that he could muffle the noise. He broke the glass completely, and grabbed the second Ryatsu sample, before he placed an illusion to make it look like it was never missing. Honestly, some Shinigami would be fooled by anything, even a simple illusion. That would keep them busy, but of course, they would never be able to find their true objective. The man smiled softly. He really needed to back and put this in storage. He had to rendezvous with a young boy fresh out of the academy. Maybe he could pit him against their fourth seat. He set out of the laboratory setting. He hoped he could find that Arrancar and make him useful to his cause. It had been several years since Naruto had imprisoned the warped villagers of Konoha within the bowels of his arena. During that time period, the Rhino animal continued to grow in size and power, swallowing up smaller hollow kingdoms and being more than a match for Las Noches. The two kingdoms entered a cold war of sorts, both being afraid of mutual destruction if they were to come to blows. Baragon had wanted a slightly weaker opponent he could face in war, not one that matched him on every scale. Naruto had clearly gotten out of hand fast, but Baragon had never found the perfect opportunity to strike. The humanoid king had actually gathered more of an army and took more territory when he had learned that Naruto was rapidly becoming a serious threat. So began the hollow arms race, with each side trying to outdo the other. The only difference between the two was that Naruto had virtually no interest in Baragon. He had forgotten all about the grudge he had against him years ago. He was gathering power for the sake of challenging Soul Society. He couldn't afford to waste hollows and resources on a smaller fish. Absolutely everything in the kingdom came down to declaring war on the Soul Society. They were rapidly building both the resources, inventions, and military necessary to challenge them. The Libro de Ciclos was very clear on how they needed to go about it. There was just one thing that Naruto was lacking above all else. That thing was information. Soul Society's power almost entirely lay within its 13 captains, and overpowering them and destroying them was an imperative. Such a thing wouldn't be easy though, and Naruto lacked information on their Zanpakutos and even abilities in general. The way they lead, how they could be taken advantage of, there was a lack of information in the archives. Naruto sat alone in his throne room, mulling over what he should do about the Soul Society. Hollows that knew the inner workings of Soul Society were hard to come by. That was probably why it had never been invaded by a full-fledged hollow force before. He messed with his brown robe a little bit, figuring that he would be at a standstill if he couldn't solve this conundrum. He needed someone who did know this information, one who could tell him everything he knew, or better yet, one who had all this information recorded somewhere. He had hid El Libro de Ciclos away in his back chamber, after one of his guards accidentally peeked in it and beheld its great secrets. He had ruthlessly slaughtered the guard after that, but the idea of the book becoming known throughout the world was unacceptable. Assassination attempts would double, even with the rebellion effectively under control. Naruto was staring out the window when the door suddenly creaked open, and a panicked guard rushed into the throne room screaming his head off. "Naruto-sama! Naruto-sama!" Naruto refrained from killing him right there. He may have important information to report. "What is it? Stop screaming your head off and tell me!" Naruto barked forcefully. The guard blanched a little but was otherwise too panicked to pay attention. "Las Noches was crushed, my emperor," he said lightly, waiting for the explosion that was sure to accompany this. Surprisingly, it never came, which was odd considering the emotional and short-tempered king that sat before him. "What? Las Noches crushed? Who the hell could beat them?" asked Naruto, more casually than one would think. That's just it, Naruto-sama. The ones that defeated Baragon's kingdom are here, sir. They say they want to talk to you." Naruto rubbed his chin, thinking he had seen a few shadows through the crack in the door. With a quick zero, he obliterated the guard that had gave him this information, as the door to the throne room swung open in full. The sound of 3 separate footfalls was heard in the room, as what entered there were not hollows. Naruto still looked bored, noticing the very human shapes that also lacked any kind of mask or hole on their bodies. So they weren't Arrancar. Shinigami, huh? Shinigami were the ones that took out that old fuck. I don't suppose I need to be told why you're here then, Naruto said. All three of them seemed to wear a haori that Naruto knew belonged to captains in Soul Society. The one that really caught his attention was the one in the center, though. It was a brown-haired man with glasses. He had a soft smile plastered on his face that Naruto could tell wasn't genuine right there. He looked sort of dopey to Naruto, but there was something about him that just placed him on edge. He felt himself reflexively reaching for his Zanpakuto. I assume you are the king of Rino Animal. I have heard that an Arrancar was the one leading, the man in the center spoke. Even his voice sounded fruity to Naruto. That would be me, yes. You assume correctly, gay boy, Naruto taunted, but the man made no indication that he was even slightly flustered by Naruto's insult. Surprisingly, the dark-skinned Shinigami on his right seemed to be the one that was annoyed. Let's talk about something, king of the Rino Animal. Naruto raised an eyebrow, but decided to humor both them and himself for the time being. My name is Aizen Sasuke, and I am here to ask you one question. Are you satisfied with what you have? Do you ever feel this place is not where you should be? Don't you want to rise even higher? Naruto didn't like where this was going. I will aid you, and if you follow me. There was the kicker. Naruto rose from his throne, and blasted a single zero at the three Shinigami that had the audacity to offer him terms. They dodged it swiftly, each of them touching down at different points in the room. Aizen still looked calm, the silver-haired one had a stupid grin on his face, but the black one was furious. What a fucking crock. Naruto bellowed as the scattered Shinigami stared at the furious king. Me, follow you. A hollow following a Shinigami will never happen. We're mortal enemies, designed for killing one another. Naruto walked down across the hall towards them, but he didn't draw his Zanpakuto. The three Shinigami had already drawn theirs. It is true that I desire something more than this simple little kingdom within Hueco I'm not God after all, but I plan on destroying every last one of you miserable Shinigami. A hollow like me following you when I'm trying to destroy you would be a disgrace. I will not become your lackey, unlike these two pieces of trash that you somehow managed to round up. The black one was clutching his sword tightly, teeth gritting in rage. Naruto turned his attention to him first. Ah, did I upset you, you kiss-ass lackey? But, you probably can't do anything without your butt buddy's permission, can you? He mocked, before bursting into peals of laughter. Aizen-sama, give me permission to execute this Arrancar. Such a destructive soul could never serve justice in our army, the black man shouted. Can him? Aizen said stoically. Tosen still looked pissed off at Naruto, and held his sword out in front in preparation to attack. Naruto grinned psychotically. He drew his Zanpakuto, before ultimately deciding against using it and setting it back in its sheath. Shuunpa and Sonido collided as both combatants rushed each other, and Sonido ultimately won out as without even blinking, Naruto was suspending Tosen 5 feet in the air by his neck. Tosen's Zanpakuto clanged against the floor as he placed his heads on the Arrancar's arm. Being a captain, he obviously wasn't used to being overpowered so easily, as the look of surprise in his face would give away. Naruto crushed the Shinigami's shoulder with his other hand and continued choking him. He started coughing violently, grunting as his bones broke. Do you have any idea who you're picking a fight with? Naruto said lowly, thoroughly intending to end the Shinigami's life. Tosen looked over to Aizen, hoping that he would be the savior that he dreamt of. Wait, Aizen said, the smile on his face indicating that he in no way cared about his subordinate. If anything, he was thrilled that there was a hollow that could defeat Tosen in a fight. He held out his Zanpakuto in front of Naruto. Why don't you take a look at my sword first, he said, as Naruto released Tosen to focus his attention on the new enemy. Its name is Kyuka Suigetsu. Naruto breathed out deeply. Shatter, Kyuka Suigetsu. Aizen dropped his sword, but there was no change in the surrounding area. No power-ups or anything like that. He just dropped his Zanpakuto, and there was no effect. Tosen was clearly incapacitated for the time being, so Naruto was prepared to move on to the next target. The grinning man seemed to be watching this passively, so he would move on to Aizen. He drew his Zanpakuto now, ready to cleave the brown-haired Shinigami in two. To see that arrogant smile wiped off of his face. He gave Aizen a horizontal slash across his torso. That was usually all he needed to finish a fight with his Zanpakuto. What he got was Aizen disappearing into a misty substance. What the? Genjutsu, he thought as Aizen disappeared into the hazy substance. He jolted himself out of his thoughts. He hadn't seen Genjutsu in about 200 years, and there was no way anyone in the afterlife had the ability to use it. But the effect was so similar that he had been mistaken at first. Out of reflex, he pointed his hands upwards in the Genjutsu release hand seal, and tried to exert some Ryatsu that would break the illusion. Nothing happened. Naruto grit his teeth and tried again. It was the same result as before. Already, his mind was running diagnostics as to what he would do. The Shinigami wanted Naruto to serve him, and if he were to be defeated and forced to serve, he would have to spend all his time working to defeat this Shinigami. My Shirkai has the power of absolute hypnosis. I can turn a fly into a dragon, and a grassy field into a deadly swamp if I so wish to. I'm afraid there is nothing you can do to break the hypnosis. Once you are under its influence, you are permanently affected. Explaining your power to the enemy. Either he's a fucking amateur, or he's very confident in his abilities. I'm going to wager a guess and say it's the latter, Naruto thought. It was times like this that Naruto wished he could have kept a few ninja skills from his time in life. It would have made the battle a little easier, despite the fact that he was much stronger now. Aizen appeared again next to his throne, and Naruto used Sonido to get right next to him in a blink of an eye. He slashed him strongly, in an attack that would be guaranteed to kill him, also slicing through his throne and half of the main palace while he was at it. A fountain of blood emerged from the diagonal slash, as Aizen was sliced in half straight through the chest. Naruto sighed in relief. Seeing the blood come out made him positive that he had gotten Aizen that time. It gave him solace. His eyes widened as a figure materialized directly behind, and Naruto was promptly stabbed. Naruto fell onto his throne, clutching the stab wound he had received from Aizen's Zanpakuto. Meanwhile, the bastard continued to stand there with that smug smile plastered all over his face, his bloody sword clutched at his side. There was no one around that Naruto could call, he had no guards outside. It was up to him to end this fight. The black bastard was still glaring at him, and he looked eager to finish him off while in his wounded state. His sword has so much power to it, but that's not even the main concern. Apparently this guy has control over unbreakable illusions, it's in a whole other league than Genjutsu. Genjutsu as least was breakable and required some kind of trigger to activate it. This Shinigami can just create illusions at will. He thought. I can see that you have already become an Aaronkar, that makes things far easier, Aizen commented, stepping forward towards the downed emperor. Naruto clutched the sleeves of his brown robe in his hands, dragging himself to his feet in order to resume the battle. He held his cutlass Zanpakuto out, while Aizen did the same thing. This final attack would finish things, for better or for worse. The two combatants rushed each other, one with a calm smile on his face, and the other with an enraged scowl. Naruto was the faster of the two, but he cleaved through nothing but air, while Aizen managed to get a heavy slash through Naruto's midsection. The Shinigami captain's blows were so strong, Naruto had never felt anything like it. Blood gushed from the wound, and Naruto collapsed onto his knees. Aizen sheathed his sword, clearly satisfied with the easy victory, all because of his Kyuka Suigetsu's powers. Ah, what are you going to do with him, Aizen-san? Asked Ikamaru, away in the corner. Tosen looked at the downed king, before he scoffed, clutching the area where Naruto had choked him. Naruto had not yet lost consciousness. Rather, his brain was already thinking of ways how he could defeat that Zanpakuto's abilities. The fundamentals of his Shirkai seemed very similar to how Genjutsu worked, but I see that the Ryatsu samples did not disappoint. We have now captured a very strong Aaronkar. He will be a perfect addition into the Espada, most likely at a very high number, Aizen stated, as he looked over the wounded Aaron-car. But, he was still no match for your Kyuka Suigetsu. Jin commented. The three Shinigami loomed over the fallen Aaron-car, who grit his teeth and scowled. Now, Emperor Naruto of the Rino Animal, you have two choices in this matter. You may serve me, and elevate to a plane of existence you didn't even believe possible. Or you can die thoughtless and ignorant. The choice is yours alone, Aizen said. Naruto bowed, if only so Aizen wouldn't see the look of extreme hatred plastered all over it. Naruto stood in front of a large mirror in the palace of Las Noches, as he slinged on his new Aaron-car uniform. Fashionably, it was far more practical than the ragged brown robe he had worn for hundreds of years. He had already put on the white jacket, and he tied his sash around his waist after putting on his hakama pants. The Aaron-car inspected himself in the mirror. It was the same standard uniform as all the other Aaron-car in Aizen's army, though his did have a slightly higher collar than usual. After he was done dressing himself, Naruto punched forward, shattering the mirror into tiny pieces. He hated having to do this, serve under that crackpot Shinigami. But, he had been patient before, and he could do it again. He was going to work in secret on breaking his Shirkai's damnable illusions, and when the time was right he would overthrow his command in Las Noches and take control for himself. It helped that Aizen didn't know about the Libro de Ciclos. Naruto, came a cold, emotionless voice from outside the changing rooms. Naruto hummed to himself, his eyes half shut. One of them moved over to see a silhouette in the doorway. Ulquiorra. The soft pitter-patter of shoes was heard as Ulquiorra entered the room and leaned against the far wall, slightly obscured by the shadows. Aizen-sama wants you to meet him in the throne room so he can decide your future in the Aaron-car army. He is still figuring out where to draft the members of the Rino Animal. Some have already been inducted into the numeros. Despite this, he wants all the exceptional killers there at once so we may figure out where we'll be placed within the Espada, Ulquiorra explained. Naruto nodded in understanding. With the recent takeover of both Las Noches and the Rino Animal by Aizen, Naruto would have expected a large power vacuum to take place all over the Hollow Plane with the absence of Huecomundo's two most powerful kings. Despite this, Aizen had proven his power when he established dominion over both of those kingdoms, quashing any resistance as well as any motives of lesser kingdoms vying for the dominant power of Huecomundo. Conquering both of those kingdoms also meant a large input of powerful Aaron-car that were now under Aizen's allegiance. That meant that many of the old Aaron-car that had served him before Aizen had toppled Las Noches would now be outclassed. There would be an extreme restructuring of the ranks, and Naruto could tell already that the old Espada and Numeros would not be happy about that. Not that they could really do anything about it, though. He and Ulquiorra were among the candidates that were being considered for entry into the Espada, the highest rank in the army that consisted of 10 Aaron-car far more powerful than average. In Soul Society, parallels could be drawn with the captains. Despite his loathing of Aizen and his forced service, he was very eager to find out what powerful Aaron-car he had underneath his command that he could slaughter. As he finished dressing himself, he walked outside the door towards the hall, where he and his right-hand man would proceed towards the Espada orientation. Ulquiorra was silent during the entire walk. His eyes kept panning downwards, and he looked like he wanted to say something to Naruto, but couldn't. Naruto brushed off the feeling as soon as they had reached the double doors into the throne room. It was a little more ornate than Naruto remembered from his time with Baragon, though Aizen was in the middle of renovating the palace and making it more suitable for Shinigami, rather than hollows like themselves. He opened the door casually, squinting slightly as light flooded the room. A smooth voice rang out through the din. "Welcome, Naruto. Ulquiorra. So nice of you to join us," it said softly, as Naruto was greeting with the bespectacled face of Aizen Susuke. How he hated that face. The two Aaron-car stepped into the room, and Naruto looked around while Ulquiorra went to mingle. There were about 20 prospective Espada in total, meaning that Aizen was really upping the ante for entry. Besides Ulquiorra, there were familiar faces like Haribel, Neutra, Grimjow, and Sale. His rival King Baragan was sitting alone in the corner by his lonesome, clearly not interested in talking to him. Naruto guessed that Baragan was feeling the same way about the loss of his kingdom, but it seemed that his subordinates at least still respected him. His former subordinates seemed to be giving him the cold shoulder, except for Sale surprisingly, who smiled at him. It was to be expected. After he had lost, all of the hollows in his kingdom had immediately shifted allegiances. Up the ornate staircase, there were 10 chairs placed in a row directly below Aizen's throne, each of them containing an Aaronkar that was looking down at them smugly. Their expressions were mixed, to be honest. A few looked genuinely excited to rip apart some fools that dared challenge an espada, while others glared down at the prospective fighters. The rest just looked on stoically. Whatever the case though, they all looked overconfident. The row seemed to be order left to right from strongest to weakest. There was a skinny, snake-eyed Aaronkar with a tattooed 8 on who was glaring at the Aaronkar, with a blue-haired woman with the number 6, 2 seats to the left, who was smirking cockily down at them. She locked eyes with Naruto and grinned wider, like she was looking down on him. He sneered at her. Was she dense or something? Surely she should have been intimidated by the former king of the Rhino animal. A brief murmuring was heard throughout the room, before Aizen rose from his seat and addressed all of them. Welcome, my dear future subordinates. I have gathered each and every one of you here today because I feel that you have the will, power, and leadership necessary to take one of the honored positions as Espada in my forces, he began. As you know, the Espada are the top 10 Aaronkar in Las Noches. They are given a number from 1 to 10 based on the level of their strength. They also have the authority to command any Aaronkar with a rank of 11 or higher. You should all be proud that you have been nominated for such a position, he said. Some of the Aaronkar cheered, but Naruto just scowled. However, you will find that becoming an Espada is not such an easy task. The Aaronkar that you see before you are in fact the current members of my beloved Espada. Each and every one of them is a combat expert, and they all command unique and terrifying abilities that make them worthy of their rank. If you are to become an Espada in my forces, you will have to challenge an Espada individually, and best him or her in battle to claim their title. Do try not to kill each other though, I would hate for some brilliant fighters to be wasted here, he said in a tone of voice that indicated that he didn't care at all. Naruto scoffed. At least he didn't sugarcoat anything, unlike Aizen. I'm feeling generous today, so I'll let you battle the Espada of your choice. Now let's see, if there is anyone who wishes to challenge an Espada for their rank, please let me know now. Might as well get this over with now. Naruto thought, as he panned his eyes throughout the selection of Espada he could challenge. His eyes landed on a bizarre Aaronkar, whose head seemed to be a jar with some red liquid contained within. He or it wore a frilly Aaronkar robe, but what caught Naruto's eyes were the 2 floating masked heads contained within the liquid. Naruto smirked, before it turned into a full, psychotic grin after he caught the sight of the tattooed one that was on both of the heads. The Primera Espada, he will do, he said, locking eyes with the strange Aaronkar. The Aaronkar stared back. I guess I'll go first, Aizen, he said unenthusiastically, when no one else spoke up. Aizen smiled as he stared at the former king, clearly happy with this development. Naruto, I am very happy for your enthusiasm in joining the Espada. Who do you wish to challenge? Aizen asked. Naruto lifted a hand slightly, pointing it towards the chair at the far left of the row. Him, he said simply, pointing at the Primera, and top dog among the Espada. This action only made Aizen smile even wider, like he knew Naruto was going to pick that option. The Jared Aaronkar simply sat there with his hands folded in his lap, not even acknowledging the fact that he had been chosen. In a way, he was probably expecting it. There were plenty of overconfident Aaronkar that felt they had a shot at the top position. Silence. Dead silence. The Aaronkar that were vying for a position stared at him blankly. Many of them had been in his kingdom, and more than knew what he was capable of. The Espada looked at each other for a brief moment, before they burst out into laughter at the seemingly foolish challenge. They muttered things like, "Is he stupid? Is he actually thinking of challenging Eren?" The blue-haired female even rose from her seat and pointed at Naruto. "Trash, we know you're stupid and all, but even challenging Eren goes far beyond the realm of stupidity. Your arrogance here is unbelievable, young Hollow. When he is done you will be nothing more than a stain on the marble floor, which in of itself is an insult to Aizen-sama," she shouted, looking down on Naruto. Naruto grit his teeth, and his eyes became bloodshot. A few Arrancar could have sworn that they heard a snap. "Yep, this cunt is definitely delusional," he thought, suppressing the urge to just slaughter her where she stood. Such a thing would only get him in deeper shit with Aizen though. Eren ignored the jeers that his fellow Espada were slinging Naruto's way, and simply rose from his seat. He made his way down the stairs, and all of the Arrancar around him gave him a wide berth. There were a few more snorting chuckles from the box above, where the remainder of the Espada were seated. Above them, Aizen looked upon the two of them passively. He raised his right hand, signifying that they could begin whenever they were ready. The center of the room had been cleared of all obstructions, so the two Arrancar could fight uninterrupted. Naruto got into position about 15 feet opposite Eren, staring the Primera down. Naruto raised an eyebrow as he witnessed the two heads speak in tandem. "With the power that Aizen-sama has vested in us," the top one said in a deep voice, "and our Glotoniria ability, nothing can stand up to us," the bottom head said in a much more high-pitched tone. "Give up now," they said simultaneously. The two-headed Arrancar pulled off one of his gloves, unveiling the squishy red tentacle that served as his Zanpakuto. That was supposed to be Glotoniria, but how it was supposed to help him fight, Naruto didn't know. "Do you ever shut the fuck up? Just hurry up and come at me so I can enjoy slicing that glass head of yours into pieces," Naruto shouted, as he drew his sword. More chuckling from the other Espada. "Such a fool," the two-head said, as Eren readied his tentacles on Zanpakuto. He was the one who made the first move, using Sonido to get the jump on his opponent. Naruto did the same thing. The two clashed in the exact center of the room, Eren tentacle trying to match Naruto's cutlass Zanpakuto. The Zanpakutos ground against each other, and they sped to the opposite ends of the room, backs facing one another. Naruto sheathed his Zanpakuto. The Espada and the Arrancar's eyes widened as both heads of Eren shrieked in pain. The Primera Espada collapsed onto his knees, and the sound of breaking glass could be heard. A few seconds later, the jar containing Eren heads was sliced in half diagonally once, and then once more. The red liquid poured from the broken container, and the two heads were both cleaved through the middle. The bottom one shrieked the loudest, moaning about how he thought Aizen was going to save him. The top head merely cursed Naruto, not willing to accept his defeat. A few seconds later, and both of them were dead. The 9 lower-ranked Espada watched in shock and awe as the strongest Espada in their ranks was taken out in a single hit, with barely any effort from the opposite party. The former generals in Naruto's army side, Eren really was no match for Naruto. The Espada had looked like he was a Gillian, after all. Superb skills on display once again. "Naruto," Aizen commented, the smile on his face widening quite substantially. He didn't even seem to care that Naruto had killed his finest Espada. Naruto scoffed at him. "Yeah, whatever. I take it I'm the Primera Espada now or whatever," he asked casually. "But of course. All that needs to be done now is make it official. It is with great pride that I welcome you into the ranks of the Espada. You may be excused until that point in time, unless someone else wishes to challenge our new Primera Espada," he said silkily. No one moved a muscle. Naruto sneered at Aizen, before he brushed his Arrancar jacket off and headed through the gilded doors. The other Arrancar watched him go. The other Espada in particular watched him with fear in their eyes, and they came to the realization that their lives were in danger if there were other challengers even half his level. Well, shit, they all thought. Naruto had retreated to his personal chambers after he had destroyed Eren in battle, and had officially been drafted into the Espada ranks as the new Primera. He lifted up his sleeve, clutching an area which was still red and raw. A black one was tattooed onto his left bicep, a clear reminder of the rank that he held. "Naruto," came the familiar voice from before. "Ulquiorra, you really have a bad habit of sneaking up on me," Naruto noted, turning to face his right-hand man. The Espada orientation had gone well for the most part, with plenty of the Arancars there taking a rank. Nearly all of the old Espada had been replaced by now, being thrown into the Privaran Espada or just outright killed. He didn't stay there for the whole event, but it was likely Baragan was the Segunda Espada now. Ulquiorra was now dressed in the same outfit that Naruto was, but his chest was exposed slightly, revealing the number 4 tattoo that now signified his ranking. All of his former generals had been drafted into the Espada, just like him. While he was the Primera and Ulquiorra was the Cuarta, Haribel herself had taken the Tercera spot. The others were down a little bit lower, though, never having advanced to Vasto Lorde class before Arancarization. Neutra was the Octava, Grimjow the Novena, and Sail the Decima. 6 of the Espada had come from the Reno animal, making it the largest change in the Espada ranking system seen so far. Then again, Aizen had stated that the incarnations of the Espada Naruto had seen up there were the original 10, so there would definitely be more changes. Naruto predicted that there would be several changes in rank even among his former men. Neutra and Grimjow would likely move up in time. The new Cuarta Espada said nothing as he walked into the room, standing in front of Naruto who was sitting on an ottoman next to his plush bed. Naruto stared at him intently, a little apprehensive on what he was about to say. The Bat Arankar leaned in slightly. "The generals of the Reno animal will always be loyal to you," he whispered, and Naruto's eyes narrowed. Ulquiorra had a reputation for being the most loyal general in the Reno animal, but the others weren't so favorable. Haribel was beginning to lose faith in him as a ruler as she began to figure out what he had done over the years. Grimjow and Neutra were pissed at him and thought him weak, but he could easily beat some fear back into them. Sail seemed to be only other one who was still on his side, but he couldn't say for sure. Ulquiorra said nothing more at that moment, but as he walked through the doorway, he said one final thing. "When you are ready to overthrow Aizen, please let me know." Naruto smiled evilly. Unfortunately for Naruto, the day where Naruto could fully overthrow Aizen was a very long way off. He was going to research the effects of Aizen's Shurikai in secret, with the help of Sail. Hopefully, they could find some way to break it together. Already, several months had passed since he and others became Espada in Aizen's army. Grimjow had taken his old friends from his time as an Ajuchas, and made them his fraction. At the moment, Aizen wanted something from him personally, so he was on his way to see what the damned Shinigami wanted. For what seemed like the millionth time, Naruto pulled open the doors to Aizen's throne room and stepped inside. Being the Primera Espada meant he was called on often to lead the palace in the absence of Aizen and his commanders. They were still active captains within Soul Society after all, and weren't ready to reveal themselves to their enemies just yet. Naruto wasn't complaining though. Their absence gave him the perfect opportunity to work in secret on cracking the mystery of Aizen's Shurikai. Aizen was sitting on his throne per usual, and Naruto still couldn't get the picture of an old, skeleton king that once sat on the throne. He at least was a much more reasonable rival. "Welcome, Naruto. I trust you have been having a fine day?" Aizen asked amiably, in a tone that made Naruto want to rip his face off. Naruto grunted in reply, Aizen being unfazed by his rude attitude. He walked up to the base of Aizen's throne, not even bothering to bow. He ignored a pair of eyes that stared at him from the side, apparently appalled by the lack of respect. "As you are no doubt aware, we are constantly training new arrivals in combat so we may better combat Soul Society when the time comes. The influx of Hollow and Arankar from both yours and Baragan's kingdom had been infinitely beneficial, and for that I thank you," he said politely. "Is he mocking me?" Naruto growled in his mind. Aizen didn't seem to notice Naruto's anger, and he continued on with his speech anyway. "Normally, I allow my espada to choose whether or not they will lead Arrancar as part of their fraction. However, there are a few talented Arrancar I feel could be used as espada in the future if they shine underneath an espada's tutelage. Consider this more of a request if you will, but I would like you to take on your very own fraction, and train our newest arrival to Las Noches. Aizen finished. Naruto's head shot up, and he almost snarled at his new leader. Was Aizen stupid or something? He was by far the biggest loose cannon in the espada. There was no guarantee he wouldn't kill his new fraction on the spot. As much as he was loath to admit, he knew it wasn't a request. It was an order, and one he had to obey if he wanted to continue his undercover work on Aizen's Shirkai. If that is your request, Aizen-sama, then I will gladly fulfill it, Naruto spat out in loathing. Aizen knew full well that Naruto hated him, so he didn't comment on it. You may have already noticed the presence of another Arrancar in the room. You may advance into the center of the room. I want you to meet your new superior. Aizen called out to a figure that was wreathed in shadow in the corner of the room. A young, green-haired Arrancar female walked confidently into the center of the room, her smug expression already flaring Naruto's temper even further. This is our newest Arrancar. We found her wandering the sands of Huecomundo outside of Las Noches. Apparently, she wanted to find a way in so she could join our cause. Her name is Neliel Tuo Delschwank, and she'll be your new fraction as of today. Naruto, Aizen said softly. Aizen-sama, if I may protest this decision. Neliel spoke up. For the first time in a while, Aizen frowned at the outright display of disrespect, but he allowed her to continue. I do not believe a mere child is fit to be my superior in these matters. If he is a member of the Espada, I should hope that their standards will improve over time. She was cut off completely, by a crushing orange Reiatsu that slithered into her veins and put a crushing force on every muscle in her body. Her eyes widened, and tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. She collapsed onto her knees, and began choking on her own saliva. Her entire form trembled, and her eyes began to water. She gritted her fingers into the ground, and tried desperately to get a hold of herself, to no avail. You're damn lucky you have to be my fraction, or else I would have killed you on the spot. Naruto shouted, as his Reiatsu faded, and Neliel was able to breathe again. Aizen had regained his smile, being very much unaffected by the strong Reiatsu that Naruto had emitted. I am not a child. I'm at least twice your age, you stupid brat, so why don't you go off of something other than stupid appearances, little girl? He sneered at her, as she moved her stringy hair that was sopping with sweat out of her face and glared at Naruto. I'm the Primera Espada, which means I'm the highest level Arrancar that Las Noches has to offer. I was also the ruler of the Reino animal, perhaps you've heard of it. Doesn't matter, the concerns of the Hollow Kingdoms would have been before your time anyway. We're leaving. Follow me back to Primera's chambers, that is where you'll be staying from now on. And, I hope you're ready to experience hell. He said to her, after she had fully recovered from the display of Reiatsu. Once again, Neliel glared poisonously at the Primera Espada, and Aizen was left musing over the superior-subordinate relationship that he had just created. They already seemed to have a vitriolic hatred of each other. Several weeks later, and Neliel was beginning to flourish underneath Naruto's teachings, even if their relationship wasn't the most stable thing around. They still loathed each other entirely, but Neliel seemed to thrive underneath harsh circumstances, and that was exactly what Naruto's training methods consisted of. Hell was pretty much an accurate word to describe Naruto's training method, and it was pretty obvious that many of Naruto's training methods were thinly veiled attempts to kill her off. Yet, Neliel survived, and was becoming a far better warrior than she had been before. In fact, all of that rapid growth was beginning to make her cocky and arrogant. The young Arrancar had no respect for anyone around her, including her superiors. Again, Neliel! Naruto shouted, as Espada and Fraction practiced in the open sands of Huecomundo. Neliel looked a little worse for wear, with several deep burn and cut wounds all over her body. Her Arrancar uniform was in tatters. Can't I at least release? She shouted at him. No, he shouted back immediately, before launching another orange Zero at her. The new Arrancar jumped out of the way of the beam, scuffing herself as she fell in the sand. What's the point of me just dodging your Zeros? It hardly seems like a civilized way to train me, she argued back at the Primera, who took the time to launch another one. Yeah, that's right. It's not really civilized, isn't it? But, as long as I'm doing this, there's a greater chance that you'll be killed by one of my Zeros, he laughed. You Batar, she was cut off by another orange blast. Several hours later, and Neliel had still not been killed by the Zeros that Naruto threw her way. As Naruto charged up one more Zero, he sighed before releasing the energy. Alright, that's enough, Neliel. Clearly you're not just going to die by getting Zeros fired at you. He sounded disappointed. Neliel fell into line with Naruto, reluctantly waiting her next orders. Let's go. Naruto said sullenly, and Neliel followed Naruto back into the palace of Las Noches. As they were about to enter Naruto's personal wing of Las Noches, they were halted by a very obnoxious voice. Yo, Naruto. I see you've taken your little bitch out for some training, huh? It asked. Naruto and Neliel turned around, seeing Neutra and his Fraction Tesla standing to the left side of the hallway. Naruto grunted. Ah, don't be such a turd. Why don't you talk to me? I know you've been feeling cranky ever since you got your ass kicked close to a year ago, but you can at least tell me what's going on with your little whore, he shouted. You disrespectful beast. How Aizen-sama made you an espada is beyond my imagination. You are crude, unrefined, and a miserable excuse for a warrior. Neliel said. Neutra sneered at her, bringing his face in to tell her off, but Naruto beat him to the punch. Literally. The Primera simply whirled back his fist and smacked Neliel right in the jaw. The girl flew back several feet, crashing into the wall and creating a sizable crater. Neliel. Regardless of how you feel about his attitude, the fact remains is that Neutra is an espada, while you are nothing but a weak, insignificant fraction. You will show respect to him. It wasn't a request. Neliel scoffed and got to her feet, turning her nose up at Naruto before she ran away off to her own personal chambers, practically spitting in the face of her superior's orders. Damn cunt. She's nothing but trouble. Naruto thought to himself. Meanwhile, Neutra seemed to lose interest in the situation at hand, so he called to Tesla to follow him. Whatever the case, Naruto could tell that Neliel wasn't fond of Neutra, and that the feeling was mutual. If Neliel ever became an espada, things would be very problematic between the two. Naruto grinned as he came to a realization. He may have just found a suitable way to get Neutra back on his side, and away from Aizen. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed this what if and want to see next part of it, comment down below and let me know. Also share this video with your friends. See you in the next video. Peace.